chilly, chilly fall. Close your eyes now. Someone's walking outside and knocks on the door.
The long road home. It was one of those nights where the air felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I was driving home after a long day at work, the kind of day that leaves you drained and desperate for the comfort of your own bed. The road stretched out ahead of me, dark and empty, lined by towering trees that seemed to close in as I drove. My car, an old hatchback that had seen better days, rattled slightly as I pressed the accelerator, the engine groaning in protest. I was on a back road, the kind that cuts through the middle of nowhere. It was the quickest way home, but it was also the loneliest. There were no street lights, no gas stations, just miles of forest and the occasional dirt driveway leading to houses I couldn't see from the road. My phone was sitting on the passenger seat, its screen dark. I'd forgotten to charge it before leaving work, and now it was dead. I cursed myself for being so careless. The gas gauge was hovering just above empty. I'd meant to fill up before leaving town, but I'd been in a hurry and told myself I could make it. Now, as the needle dipped lower, I started to regret that decision. I glanced at the odometer, trying to calculate how far I'd gone since the last time I'd filled up. It was a useless exercise. I knew I was pushing my luck. The car sputtered and my heart sank. I eased off the gas, hoping it was just a fluke, but the engine coughed again, then died completely. I coasted to a stop on the side of the road, the silence pressing in around me. I turned the key, but the engine wouldn't start. I was out of gas. I sat there for a moment, staring out into the darkness. The trees loomed on either side of the road, their branches swaying in the wind. I felt a pang of unease, but I pushed it aside. I needed to stay calm. I turned on my hazard lights, the rhythmic clicking sound oddly comforting in the stillness. Then I got out of the car, hoping to flag down a passing driver. The road was eerily quiet. I stood there for what felt like forever, straining my ears for the sound of an engine. But there was nothing, just the rustle of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. I started to feel like I was the only person left in the world. Finally, I saw headlights in the distance. Relief washed over me as I stepped into the road, waving my arms. The car slowed as it approached, and for a moment I thought they were going to stop. But then they sped up again, swerving around me and disappearing into the night. I stood there, stunned, as their taillights faded into the darkness. I got back in my car, feeling more hopeless than ever. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't walk to the next town. It was too far, and the road was too dark. I decided to wait a little longer, hoping another car would come by. But as the minutes dragged on, I started to feel like I was completely alone. Then out of nowhere, I heard a noise. It was faint at first, like a tapping sound. I froze, listening intently. The sound came again, louder this time. It was coming from outside my car. My heart started pounding as I slowly turned to look out the window. There was someone standing there. I nearly screamed. A man was standing just outside my door, his face partially illuminated by the glow of my hazard lights. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and a worn-out jacket. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I rolled down the window just a crack, my hands trembling. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You look like you're the one who needs help," he said. His voice was low and gravelly, sending a chill down my spine. I hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. "I ran out of gas," I admitted. "Do you have a phone I could borrow? Mine doesn't have service out here." He shook his head. "No phone, but I can give you a ride to the next town. There's a gas station there." I didn't like the idea of getting into a stranger's car, but what choice did I have? I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, and he was the only person who had stopped. I nodded reluctantly and grabbed my bag before getting out of the car. His truck was parked a little ways down the road, its engine idling quietly. It was an old pickup, the kind that looked like it had seen better days. The passenger door creaked as I opened it, and the interior smelled like cigarettes and motor oil. I climbed in, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my stomach. The man got in on the driver's side and started driving without saying a word. The silence was oppressive, and I kept glancing at him out of the corner of my eye, trying to gauge his intentions. He seemed calm, almost too calm, and it made me nervous. After a few minutes, he finally spoke. "You're not from around here, are you?" I shook my head. "No, I was just visiting family. I'm on my way home." My heart skipped a beat. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was racing. What was he planning to do? Why had he stopped for me? I needed to get out of the truck, but how? I pretended not to notice the knife, keeping my eyes fixed on the road ahead. "How much farther is it?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer right away. Then, in a voice that was almost a whisper, he said, "Not far now." I knew I had to act fast. I reached for the door handle, but it was locked. The man noticed and smirked, tightening his grip on the knife. "Don't even think about it," he said. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed a plan. I glanced around the truck, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. There was nothing within reach. Then I remembered the bag I'd brought with me. It was sitting at my feet, and inside was a heavy water bottle. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I waited for the right moment. The man was focused on the road, his grip on the knife loosening slightly. I took a deep breath, then swung the bag at him as hard as I could. The water bottle hit him in the side of the head, and he let out a grunt of pain. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed the door handle again, and this time it opened. I jumped out of the truck, landing hard on the pavement. My knees screamed in protest, but I ignored the pain and scrambled to my feet. The man was shouting now, but I didn't look back. I ran into the trees, my heart pounding in my chest. Branches scratched at my face and arms, but I didn't care. I just kept running, desperate to put as much distance between us as possible. I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't stop until I couldn't run anymore. I collapsed behind a large tree, gasping for breath. My legs were shaking, and my whole body felt like it was on fire. I listened for any sign that the man was following me, but all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. I stayed there for what felt like hours, too scared to move. Eventually, I heard the sound of a car engine in the distance. I peeked out from behind the tree and saw headlights approaching. It was a different car this time, a sedan with 2 people inside. I hesitated, unsure whether to trust them, but I knew I couldn't stay out here forever. I stepped out onto the road and waved my arms, hoping they would stop. The car slowed down, and a woman rolled down the window. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I need help," I said. "Please." They let me into the car, and I told them everything that had happened. The woman called the police, and they stayed with me until help arrived. The man with the knife was never found, but I didn't care. I was just grateful to be alive. The police took my statement and searched the area, but there was no sign of the man or his truck. They told me I was lucky to have escaped and urged me to be more careful in the future. I nodded, still shaken by the experience. The couple who had rescued me offered to drive me to the nearest gas station. I filled up a canister and returned to my car, which was still sitting on the side of the road. The engine started without issue, and I drove home in silence, my mind racing. When I finally got home, I locked the door behind me and collapsed onto the couch. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. What if I hadn't noticed the knife? What if I hadn't been able to escape? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I decided to take a shower, hoping it would help me relax. But as I stood under the hot water, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept hearing noises, creaks and thuds that made me jump. I told myself it was just my imagination, but the unease lingered. When I got out of the shower, I noticed something strange. My front door was slightly ajar. I was sure I had locked it. My heart started pounding as I crept toward the door, my mind racing with possibilities. Had someone broken in? Was the man from the truck here? I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and slowly pushed the door open. The living room was empty, but the air felt different, like someone had been there. I checked every room, my grip tightening on the bat, but there was no one. Just as I was about to relax, I heard a noise from the kitchen. It was faint, like the sound of someone moving around. I crept toward the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the doorway, I froze. There was a man standing in the kitchen. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and a worn-out jacket. It was him, the man from the truck. He turned to look at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You didn't think I'd let you get away that easily, did you?" he said, his voice low and menacing. I screamed and swung the bat, but he was faster. He grabbed it out of my hands and threw it aside, then lunged at me. I fought with everything I had, but he was too strong.
He pinned me to the ground, his hands around my throat. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, I heard a loud bang. The man's grip loosened and he slumped to the side. I looked up to see my neighbor standing in the doorway holding a gun. "I heard screaming," he said, his voice shaking. "Are you okay?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. The police arrived soon after, and the man was arrested. I learned that he had been following me for weeks, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had cut my fuel line, knowing I'd be stranded on that dark road. It was a terrifying experience, but it taught me to always trust my instincts. I moved to a new town shortly after, determined to leave the past behind, but even now, years later, I still think about that night, and I always make sure to keep my gas tank full.